I will kick things off. Welcome to our iCotech webinar this afternoon. It's great that you can join us. Again, apologies for the slightly late start. There was a problem with our link. We sent it out again. There might be people joining as we go along, but I'm sure they can catch up. It's great to have you with us. I'm John Donovan. I'm the head of sales and marketing at iCotech. I'll be sort of topping and tailing our webinar today with just a little bit of background and housekeeping at the end. But the main meat on the bones or crux of the matter will be provided by my very esteemed colleague, Toby Lumber, who's the head of delivery here at iCotech. So he will be guiding you through the information. And indeed, he is available to answer any questions you may have. I'll be kind of playing housekeeper, if I may, because Toby will be focusing on the presentation. If you could put your questions in the chat, I will pick them up and ask them of Toby as we go along, and then we can have a Q&A session at the end briefly for anything that we haven't covered. So that's kind of the itinerary of how it's going to work. So without further ado, we will kick on. As I go to a little slide too early. As I say, we're going to do a little bit of introduction and background, and then give you that introduction and capabilities of the Power Platform, and really then what iCoPlan is in terms of the concept of centralizing your projects within your portfolios all in one place, and then what's next. Is there something we can perhaps do for you in terms of providing more information or a sandbox environment? It's not a selling webinar, it's a knowledge share webinar. So we'd love to get your input into perhaps how we can help you next, even if it's just signposting you to something. There's some great pictures we've got at iCotech. We'll have to bring our photographer back in again. So just to give you a little bit of background on iCotech, normally you see the face of Joel Markham on these webinars. We've given him the day off from that, but he's our CEO and founder, and really just to give you some background of why we feel we're a specialist PPM provider, consultant. Joel comes from that background, a lot of experience at Lloyds Bank, Welsh Water, perhaps most extensively in Babcock International. So he, along with a number of my colleagues in this business, have a deep foundation in the project management sphere. So it was his concept, his desire to set up iCotech to kind of bring create best practice almost. Joel has experienced good things and he's experienced a lot of bad things, as he's normally told you. His desire was to create a project management solution where you can use the Microsoft suite or Microsoft Power Platform to get a project management solution which does what you need it to do, which can be configured and make it bespoke to an organization, and tries to strip away those problematic features that have been in traditional project management. So that's Joel. I've given him the big build up. But perhaps more importantly on the call today is Toby. Toby Lambert is our head of delivery. Toby, every time he opens his mouth, I learn from him, such as his expertise. And he's got a vast CV at all. We did try and put his whole CV in, but it took up 7 slides. So we've tried to condense it a little bit. But Toby, as you will find from the demonstration momentarily, is eminently qualified and yeah, someone at iCotech we all learn from on a daily basis. iCotech, as I say, as I change the slide over, we have been on a journey over the last 3 years, which included, you might have heard of it, a pandemic as well. So it credits to Joel and the rest of the team that we've gone from strength to strength in a difficult environment. In fact, the concept that Joel had was back in 2012 for iCotech, but He had other things going on in his day-to-day job, so we really sort of went live in true version 2 style in November 2018, and there's been a journey there, picking up clients, I'm pleased to say, along the way, both in public and private sector. IPO is one of the names you might recognize on there, BEIS, the government department, and if you're a tea drinker like me and you like Yorkshire tea, you'll notice the name Betty's and Taylor's on there, the producers of Yorkshire tea. We've done a lot of extensive work and continue to do a lot of extensive work with them. And sort of key milestones this year. We've gone international. We've sold iCoPlan, or we're delivering iCoPlan, I should say, to a partner in New Zealand, and we're starting to hit the road again. We were at trade shows all over the UK. We were in London last week, and we're really looking to get the brand out there and work in collaboration with people. I won't drag these out too long. As I say, iCoPlan, iCotech, is built on certain foundations, chiefly that we're PPM specialists and we want to provide a PPM solution. We do that through application development and our hugely qualified development team making use of Microsoft tools, namely, perhaps why we're all here today, the Power Platform. But we're very consultative in our approach. We're very collaborative. We're not looking to give you a solution which is one size fits all, or is indeed even a finished article. It's a consultative approach where we look to work with you to create a project management solution that's fit for your organization, fit for purpose, bespoke even. So that's our way of working. It's very much partnership based. It's very much collaborative based. I won't drag this out because I've already touched on that, but again, there's some key logos there of people that we work with at the moment. So you'll be able to recognize some of those, both public and private sector. I think this fell under my remit to present this slide, Toby, but you're the expert, and they've heard too much of my voice at the moment. So I don't know whether this is the good time to kind of hand over to you, so I don't embarrass myself with my lack of technological expertise, Toby. So without further ado, can I invite you to the virtual stage?
Yes, absolutely. I no one could ever tire of your voice and your quips, John. So thanks very much. Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Toby Lumber. I head up the delivery over here in iCotech. I'm not going to bore you with the technology side as well because it's very boring, isn't it, really? But essentially what we do, we are a Microsoft Gold partner. So everything we do is related to Microsoft technology. The primary tool we deal with is something called the Power Platform. Which is Microsoft's new approach towards development. And they've built this so it can be very simplistic to use. They call it their low code, no code approach. So you can end up with citizen developers within your organizations doing things themselves. But it can also be incredibly complicated. You can come to specialists such as us who, if you need to have more complexity built in particular solutions. So what the Power Platform is, essentially, it's a suite of applications that allow us to build capabilities. Those primary applications are something called Power Apps, that you can build the user interface and the management of data. Something called Power Automate that allows us to manage the flow, the work management of data through certain stages and to integrate into other products. And a tool called Power BI, which is very much around data visualization and gaining insights into your data, so actually getting some value from the data that you're entering. Everything we do sits within the Microsoft ecosystem, if you like. So in terms of your data, it's secure. It sits within your environment. It doesn't sit in any funny little boxes down in any cupboards anywhere like that. And it can obviously integrate seamlessly into all the Microsoft products. So your sign-on, it's single sign-on. You can use capabilities such as SharePoint, such as Teams. All those data applications can work with these tools as well. So in terms of what we're trying to solve here, we talk to a number of people across the PPM sphere, and the typical thing we get back is there isn't transparency over their project delivery process, over their portfolios, or there are issues in terms of projects not running correctly, not following the proper governance standards, projects that may be out of control, or simply just a spread of information all over the place. So there might be some things in SharePoint, some things in Excel, You're just not getting that overall holistic view. And this is very much the problem that we're trying to address with some of our tools, with iCoPlan in particular. And that's by giving a foundational tool that allows you to put all your information into one place to start to manage that information. But then you can actually start to grow that and iterate that as well. So if there's further capabilities you want to add on in the future, maybe you want to start very simple just by getting a list of all your projects in one place, but you want to build on that to do program management, you want to start to link in resource management, maybe you want to start to do project risks and then link that into corporate risk management, that is all entirely possible. So that's very much what we're trying to solve and what we're hearing from a number of our customers around the issues that we have on a day-to-day basis. So what is iCoPlan? Very simply, iCoPlan is a development, it's a product that we pulled together. We believe it kind of fits, or it kind of addresses that problem. It provides a base where you can manage your projects, your programs, and your portfolios all in one place, and then you can actually start to build on that as well. But the key thing, as John was saying, is we don't believe there is a one-size-fits-all for project management. We believe this gives you a very good starting point. It's got lots of best practice in there in terms of how you do project management, how you do risk management, all those kind of things. But we fully appreciate that every organization works in slightly different ways. They may have different stage gating. You may not have any gating at all, even down to terminology. Some people refer to sponsor, some people refer to executive, some people refer to SRO. So what we really have is, if you like, a starting point. We would always expect there to be some form of configuration, even if that's just minor tweaking to that, to enable you to basically give you an application, a working solution that meets the requirements within your business. So, conveniently, we're moving on to the iCoPlan. That's good news. I've just about run out of other interesting things to say about this. So,
sorry, Toby, I'm trying to be your glamorous assistant with the slides. So, did that give you enough opportunity to capture everything, or is there anything or are you happy now to do the full-on magic show?
No, I'm absolutely. I think all our guests are here to see the application itself, isn't it? Not listen
Right.
to us drone on about what we do. So
I will stop sharing then and allow you to take over.
Excellent. Okay, great. So you should all be seeing my screen right now. Please yell or drop a message into the text if you can't. But I'm assuming you can. So what you're looking at is basically the starting point for what we have within iCoPlan. And I'm just going to talk about this very quickly before I start opening anything up and clicking on things. But essentially, it's a container for all things related to PPM in effect. We have some navigation along the top. So if you select an item, you can essentially do something with that particular item. So we can create a new project from here. We can maybe run some reports. And then down the left-hand side, we've got the navigation through the system. So we have a concept of projects belong in programs belong in portfolios, fairly standard approach. And then we also have a concept of requests. So these may be new change items, new projects that come along. They're not necessarily projects yet. They need to go through some form of approval process. But this would hold your pipeline of future work that you may have. Now, in terms of structure, the basic 3-level structure is what most organizations work towards. But actually, some have more, some actually have less. So again, this can be flexed depending on your individual requirements. What we're looking at in the center is the list of projects. So these are just some test projects, just some examples that we have in here. And the information you're seeing is really controlled by this thing up here, which is called a view. Okay, so view just says how the data is organized, what columns you're seeing, how it may be filtered, how it may be ordered, those kind of things. If you're familiar with SharePoint, it's a very similar concept. They have views in SharePoint as well, albeit they work slightly differently. So, for example, if I just want to see my projects, we've got some logic in the background that says this defines what my project is. And now I get to see a redefined list of those. If you go and pick one of these projects, go and have a look at it, and we'll take you through some of the functionality that we've got here. So I'm picking a project called Project Vulcan. I'm not quite sure where that name came from. But very simply, what we have in here at the beginning is some data down the bottom of the screen. So this is where we can actually input some information relating to that particular project. We've got some navigation along the middle here. So these are different parts of the system, different parts of the PPM process. that it relates to. And then along the top, and I'm going to talk about this for a second or two, along the top, we've got essentially the life cycle that this project is following. Okay, so this is really important, and this is really key to how this application works. What this is doing is mimicking the project life cycle in this stage. So we've got an agile life cycle that's following. And you can see that each one of these represents the different stages that project may go through. Now you can have different life cycles for different projects. So you may have a waterfall project, you may have whatever it is, maybe more complex ones, and those can all be built and configured depending on what you actually need. But this is much more than just a list of stages that your project will go through. What this actually allows you to do is to control or guide the project manager as they're moving through those. So for example, here we're in beta, and what we might want to do is move into the closure stage. And if I drop this down, you see I then get presented with a number of questions that need to be completed to enable me to move on into that next stage. And we've built this so it's very basic. It's very, it's just if you like, an aid memoir to the project manager. So have I done my business case? Have I maybe updated my lessons? Have I got approval to move on to the next stage? And they're very simple questions. I think these are just yes/no questions or not applicable. And we can build a bit of logic behind this. So maybe we can say, well, if you answer no, that's not okay. You've got to answer yes or not applicable. We can build some more logic in, so maybe we say not applicable. Maybe that comes up with a text box and you've got to explain why. But essentially, all these questions here are really down to you as an organization to define, to map into either your governance or into your how you want to prompt your project managers as they move between different stages. And we've kept this particular one to say very light. I can complete questions and say next stage, but you can actually build this to be as complex as you want. So if you had an approval process in the background where it may need to go to the sponsor, and the sponsor would have to come into the system to approve that movement into the next stage, that's entirely possible. If you wanted other actions to happen as a result of that, so for example, maybe some notifications going to a group of people, or maybe the finances that are held in the system to be baselined or copied off or something like that, again, that is all entirely possible. So this is really where we come down to the tailoring that we would do for each of our customers to ensure that that life cycle represents their business process and really gives them the controls and the governance around each of those stages. Okay, so that's the life cycle. Just going to very quickly talk about some of the data that we hold against the project. This is just some of the base information. So each project, we give it a name, we link it to a program, we give it a project manager, we give it a description, all those kind of things. And this is entirely up to you. You can have as many or as a few fields as you want to basically meet your project information. We can make this very complicated, so we can link into other entities, different things, if you like. They can be a whole set of choices, different options, or they could just be text or numbers or dates, whatever you need. As I say, it represents the information that you need to get your project to ultimately run it. Now, I'm going to skip over some of these, but I'm going to go and talk about risks. And probably risk is the one that everybody gets excited about. And essentially what you're looking at here is a risk register. So this is the project risk register that we've got for this particular project. And again, this is represented through a view. Okay, so a view, again, is just controlling the columns and the sorting and the filtering of information. So on here, I could add a new risk very simply just by coming in here and clicking new risk. But what I'm actually going to do is go and look at an existing one. So I've got one down here around licenses. So I can just click on the risk ID, and then that will actually open up the details related to that risk. And again, I'm presented with a form, and we would configure these forms to represent the information you need to know about risks. But we think this covers kind of the 80% of that. And this gives us the base information. So we've got kind of what's the risk. What's the risk name, what's the status of that, who's it's assigned to, when's it due, those kind of things. Further down, we've got some form of risk assessment. So we're doing this on a 5x5 matrix. But again, you may have a different way of assessing your risks. You may have something a little bit more complicated or even potentially a bit more simple. And then on here, again, we've got some pages, so some further tabs along here. So we've got a page for narratives. So this is just some further textual information or context around this particular risk. We've got the ability to create actions that are actually related to this risk as well. So if I created a new action from here, then we would see this both in the project action log, but we'd also know that it's related to this one particular risk that we've got. And then finally, we've got the ability to add notes. And these are really kind of progress notes, so comments that the project manager or the risk owner or whoever it is might be putting in about this risk during its life cycle. So the way to keep some kind of audit and understand actually what's going on with this particular risk. Some of our customers ask us to do a bit more with this as well. So one of the things we can do in this is build some escalation. So potentially you've got the ability to click a button in here, and then that could generate this risk as an issue within the project. Or indeed, you could escalate it to a program. So maybe you could click a button in there, and then that is automatically escalated up. We do have a little bit of escalation actually in this one. So we have just an option in here and say this has been escalated to the program. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute in terms of how that works. I showed you the life cycle for a project. Remember the agile life cycle that the project goes through. Again, you could do the same thing for a risk. So if you had a very set drafting, approval, management, and closeout of a risk, and you have various controls along each one of those stages, again, that can be built in to actually help the project manager or the risk owner manage this risk through. Hopefully that makes sense in terms of your management of risks and your risk registers. We also have an issue register, and this really works in exactly the same way. So if I just picked on one of these issues, what you'll see is the information we record against the issue is slightly different. So, we've got some issue categories, we've got priorities, we've got some different narratives down here, but essentially it's the same concept. We can hold a number of issues against the project. We can then hold other components against that. So again, in this example, we can hold actions against an issue. We can hold notes and progress updates against those. But really, it's around the tailoring, understanding what information you may want around your issue management process, and then ensuring we've got that collected within the system. Actions, decisions, changes, all exactly the same. So again, actions, it's our list of actions. We can add new one in, or we can see those actions that have been created from other entities. Benefits, again, works in exactly the same way, but I'm going to look at this one just very quickly. So one thing we've added into benefits is both ability to record the benefit, record what it is, and record some information about it. So for example, whether it's cashable or non-cashable. But then we've also added the ability to draw out a profile, because we recognize that not all benefits get delivered at the end of the project or on a certain date on the 31st of March. They may take a number of different dates. So this allows us to basically profile out the delivery of those benefits over a time period. And then we can actually assess that over time as well and come back and say, how did we actually deliver against those benefits? And we can put the two things together. And I'll come on and show you Power BI in a minute, and I'll show you how we can use some of that data and surface that through. So a couple of other tabs on here. So we've got lessons, we can do feedback on a project. We can do some project assumptions. Status reports, I'm just going to talk about very quickly. So status reports, highlight reports, you may call them different things. We've just called them status reports in here. This allows us to build up a history of all our status reports throughout the history of the project. So again, in exactly the same way as we've got a risk, we can see all the entries that have been made. If we wanted to create a new one, we can just say new status report. That brings us up the basic form. So this is being tailored to have a couple of narrative fields. So what's the achievement in the period, what you're doing next period, and then the ability to add in some rags as well. And these are just manual rags currently. You just select a red, amber, green, and then you can put in some narrative around it as well. But some of our customers actually want these rags to be calculated automatically based on some kind of business criteria. And again, that's all entirely possible. So if, for example, you had your finances in here, you might have a budget figure and a forecast figure, then maybe there's some kind of tolerance between the two. And if you're over by 10% or over your budget by 10% or something like that, then that rag can automatically be set to red every time you come in and do your status report. So again, very much up to the individual customer, how they want that customized. We've just left this really, just very simple initially. Our changes on that. We've also got some high-level finances in here. Appreciate that people do finances in completely different ways and use lots of different systems to do this. So we haven't really gone to town on this. At the moment, we've just got some basic numbers in here. So you just enter in your actual spend on the project, you enter in a liability, add the two things together, gives you your committed spend, enter in your remaining forecast, and that totals it up. You enter in a budget, does a calculation, one from the other, and that gives you your variance. Down the bottom, we've got the ability to track any budgets. So this enables us to understand how our budget may change over time. But this isn't really doing anything particularly clever at this stage. This is just a record of those budgets. It can do some clever stuff, but again, each customer has got their own particular needs. What we've done for some other customers is we've actually integrated parts of their data into the system as well. So we've had kind of actuals being fed into this. And for some others, then they enter in their forecasts into here, and then that information gets interfaced out and over into their finance system. In multiple cases, we use Power BI as well. So we use Power BI to potentially take some forecast data or high-level numbers from the BPM system, and then essentially to mash that up with some of the finance data from the financial system as well. So you get that single view of your project finances, even if the data may sit in different physical systems. Okay, one other one I want to talk about, in fact, two others I want to talk about. One is documents, which is a key component of any project management system. Documents isn't actually linked into this one, but typically what we do is we use SharePoint, and we just have a tab on the side that says documents. It's linked to a SharePoint library, and then you can interact with your documents from here. So you can drag and drop a document in, or indeed you can click a button and actually open that within a SharePoint environment. So quite easy, quite simple to use, and utilizing that technology and that expertise that you already have. And then the other element is the task management, so the scheduling of the project itself. And for this, we use a component, so it's a Microsoft component called Project for the Web. And this is really a newer tool that Microsoft had brought out probably about 2 or 3 years ago, but are continuing to develop and iterate. Even to the point we've got a new page that popped up the other day. So Microsoft are continually adding more functionality into this. Now I could talk about this for probably the next 30 minutes, but I've got lots of other things to do. We've got some great webinars around Project for the Web that kind of give you some really good insight into how the tool actually works and what you can do with it. So if that's something of interest, I suggest you have a look at those. Very briefly, if you are familiar with tools like Primavera or Microsoft Project Desktop, essentially this does the same kind of thing. But what it does, it allows you to work with it in a much more intuitive way. You can create tasks in here. You can create tasks within a WBS structure. Obviously, with those tasks, you can assign certain information to them. So, for example, if we just take this one, we can give it a start date, a finish date, a duration. Obviously, we can manage that by saying, is it, what percentage complete is it? And then we can also assign some effort to that as well. So effort, think work in Microsoft Project Desktop language. What we can also do is we can add a checklist onto this. So for those of you who might be familiar with Planner and the ability to do checklists in there, it's essentially the same thing. And I think this is really handy because probably historically, I might have done 5 or 6 tasks within my plan to essentially accomplish one thing, whereas now I can actually build that up into a checklist. So for example, I've got a documentation of approach. So my checklist might be something like draft, and then I might want to add a new item, which is review with team. And then I might add another item in here, which might be sign off. So I can build up these checklists to actually say, these are the things I need to go through to actually accomplish this one particular task, rather than having to build up lots and lots of tasks and make a very busy schedule. If something got really complicated, so if this sign off actually became really complicated and needed to be tasked in its own, I could literally just click this button and that would make a new task from there. There's lots of other things you can do with the task itself. I won't go into all the details of those, but needless to say, you can build up your schedule in a WBS structure. We can enter a new task at any point. So I can just right click and say, cut task, copy task, insert a new task. I can move tasks around. I can build dependencies between different tasks as well. And hopefully you can see visually it's quite, it's quite nice to look at and quite easy to work with, even to the point I can click into the task and I can actually type and change things directly in here. Now, one of the things you need for task management, of course, is a Gantt chart. Now, for whatever reason, Microsoft don't seem to call things Gantt charts anymore. Everything seems to be a timeline. But this is just an example of how you can then see these tasks essentially represented as a timeline feature. Now, what I love about this is it's just really easy to use. It's really intuitive. So if, for example, this was going to take a bit longer, I can just grab hold of that and drag it. And then you'll see the rest of the tasks all move and the task moves back in again. I can also click on a task and drag that onto another task and build dependencies between them as well. So I don't need to go through all the things about understanding predecessors and successors and all those kind of things. It's just very intuitive in terms of how it works. What I can also do is use the filters, and the filters are great. Got the same thing in Microsoft Project Desktop, but it's just not very intuitive. So if in here I wanted to know all the tasks that were late, I can click on that, and I'll probably see quite a lot of them. So maybe I don't want to see my late ones, maybe I want to see everything that's due in the future. And then just very quickly, you'll see the data and the tasks actually filter down to what I want to do. So just a quick way of actually, helping people use that schedule and trying to actually manage their plans appropriately rather than just having a schedule for the sake of it. One final thing with Project for the Web. Again, if you're familiar with Planner, you'll probably be familiar with this, which is essentially what we call the board view. So the board view allows you to assign an additional attribute to each task, and then you can put those into these particular buckets. And you can call the buckets whatever you want. It's just another way to help group your data together and to put them into a Kanban view or a kind of Trello type view of your tasks. If you want to move things around, it's dead easy. You can just drag, drop, and then you can move between different buckets. And even from here, if something was complete, I can just tick that little button here and mark that task as complete. So as I say, there's lots of other components, lots of other things you can do with Project for the Web. We've got some really good webinars out there. I think they're all on YouTube. I'm sure that John will point you in that direction. So if you want to know some more about that, then please feel free to have a look at those. Or indeed, I'm sure we'll be running some more seminars in the near future around them. So, I'm going to jump back a bit. So we talked around projects. What I'm going to go on and do is just talk around programs very quickly. So going back to our PPM structure, we have projects belong to programs, and then we've got one in here called an internal system. So again, you might be starting to recognize this view. It's the common view in terms of how we build these particular entities to hold certain information. Here we've got slightly less than on project because we don't think we need to do assumption management or lessons on a program level. We just, it's more important on a project level. But that said, if you needed those kind of entities, they could be added into the programs as well very easily. What we do have on here is we can hold program level risks. So just as you did for a project, you went to the project risk register and you created a new risk. You can do exactly the same thing for a program. Okay, so it's the same information that you're seeing. You've got the same options. It's literally recorded against the program rather than being recorded against the project. But what we've also built into this bit is you can see we've got some escalated risks. So if you remember earlier, I was looking at this particular project risk, and I said that it had been escalated to the program just by using this little drop down in here. That then ensures that this risk is visible at that program level, as well as being visible at the project level. Now, again, as I say, different customers work in different ways. Some of them want that to be more intelligent in the way it works. And there's a button that might actually move the risk from a project level to a program level or close off that risk at the project level and then create or duplicate that risk through at the program level. There's others who, in fact, have an approval process. So they don't allow their project managers to automatically escalate the risk. It's got to go through an approval first. The program manager needs to sign that off, and then it becomes a program level risk. So there's lots of different ways. It's all about understanding what's right for your business and how we can build that into the solution. A couple of things I'll talk about in here. So I just mentioned finances very quickly. I talked about the project level finances earlier, and this really works in the same kind of way. So very basic, you can just enter in some base numbers around your program finances, and you can hold a program set of budgets down here. But probably what's key is this bit over here. And this is essentially looking at all the projects that belong to this one particular program and then starting to wrap up some of those values. So for example, if we want to see how much we spent across all our projects in this particular program, we can very quickly see there's been a 15 grand spend across all of them. We can see the remaining forecast is 95 grand. So just a very quick way of kind of using these hierarchies and trying to get some meaningful information out of that very quickly. I'm not going to talk about portfolios, but essentially a portfolio is a grouping of programs. And again, we can put various attributes and information against that portfolio exactly as we have for programs. The thing I did want to talk about is requests. So these would essentially be your future projects, your things in the pipeline that might be coming along. And I'm just going to take an example here. We've kept this very basic because everybody seems to do prioritization and pipeline management in many different ways and have lots of different information. So we've not tried to tell anyone how we think you should be doing that. But we've got some basic information. So kind of what is it? What's the state of this? What's the priority? Tell me a bit more about it. Give me a business case. And then there's some very basic kind of prioritization measures down the bottom. So you can just put in some ratings against different things down here, and then it will create a score. And then over here, it's doing a return on investment as well, purely based on your forecast cost and your benefit. What we can do in here, we can obviously make this a lot more complicated. So we can build life cycles on here, exactly as we had for projects. We can build a whole set of quite complex prioritization measures if that's needed. Really depends on how you actually assess and prioritize your future projects. And then there's even the ability to trigger things down a workflow. So if it got to a point where you thought, actually, yeah, we're ready for this project to go, it might be a case where you can come up to this button or a button up like this, say create project. That can trigger a workflow down to whoever it might be in the organization, and then they would actually have to approve that. So you're kind of then keeping your history of audit actually within the system itself. You're not having to record that within emails and then save that into a SharePoint library somewhere and then forgetting which library it was or anything like that. It's very much about keeping the data together all in one place. A couple of things I just wanted to mention around the iCoPlan application itself. You see down here, we were looking at risks a minute ago, but we were looking at them very much from a project perspective or from a program perspective. What this allows you to do is look at all the risks across the piece. So I can look at all the risks across all the projects and very quickly see what's going on. And again, I can use the views. These are very basic at the moment, but there's only one in there. But I can use the views to narrow down that list of risks I'm seeing in there. And that would really depend on what kind of level of complexity or filtering you might actually need as a business. One thing I haven't mentioned as well is security, because obviously that can be quite key. This is all entirely role-based. So everything you would expect around assigning a user into a particular role and then only allowing that role to do certain things is entirely possible. So for example, only your PMO may be able to create a project, but then maybe someone in the project team can't actually edit certain details around that project. We can also make that relevant to data as well. So we can set up organizational hierarchies. We can place people into those hierarchies, and then you would only see projects or information that are related to a project in the organization you work in, or indeed because it's hierarchical. And if you sat on the top of the tree, you would then see all of the projects that sat underneath you. A couple of the other capabilities that I just want to touch on as well. I know that Teams is always an area that people get excited about, and I just wanted to show you this very quickly as an example. She's asking me to log in for some reason. Now, one of the things you can do is embed this within Teams itself. If that's going to come back to life, there we go. So what I've done here, purely as an example, is I've created a new Teams channel just for this one particular project. Okay. So this is this thing down here called Project Vulcan. So what this allows me to do is actually to have a conversation with other project team members that I may bring into this Teams channel. So I've got my history in there. And I've got somewhere I can collaborate about this one particular project. Teams channels typically come with a SharePoint library as well. So that can be available as my project documents, or I could have that within the application itself. And then I've got the a link into Project Vulkan in here as well. So I can actually go directly into that project. Oops, not quite sure why it's not letting me sign in for some reason. They always say there's two things in life that guarantee, which are taxes and death. But I always say something going wrong when you're going to give a demonstration is the third one. There we go, suddenly working. Yeah, so you can go directly to that project within the Power App as well, from within the Teams environment. And indeed, you can add in other things from Teams as well. So I've added in a wiki in this stage. I've added a link to some reporting. You may have Trello boards. You may have other services as well, and you can link in all those things. So one final thing I want to touch on, just before I hand back to John, is then on the reporting side as well. So it's great that we've got an application we can offer, which enables you to manage your information. But really, the key thing is, well, what are you going to do with this? What difference is it going to make that I've now got this information all into one place? And the key thing really is around transparency and control, as I alluded to previously. So very quickly, what we've got here is the ability to see all our projects across our portfolio. Now, because this is using Power BI, we've got lots of abilities around filtering or managing that data or surfacing that in slightly different ways. But it also enables us to ask questions of the data as well and start to do drill downs through distinct hierarchies, or even kind of slice and dice the data. So very simply, what I'm looking at is a list of all the projects I've got in the portfolio. I could filter that down by program, sponsor, project manager. In fact, I could filter it down by any piece of data that we hold within the system. But over here, you can see that one of the projects is red. And the obvious question is, well, which project is it? So I can click on that, and you'll then see the rest of the data then filters down very quickly to that one project. So I can see it's the evaluation project, and that may then be a cause for concern. Now, this is obviously a relatively small subset, but where you're dealing with much larger volumes of projects, obviously this starts to give you some real benefits. Exactly as we've done with the project data, we've brought all that together. We've put it into one place that allows you to see that, have that visibility, and to filter down through hierarchies. We can do that with all the other components as well. So if I just go back to risks as an example, I can then see all the risks we've got. I've got a couple of filters up here already, so I'm just seeing my active risks that are assigned to projects. But again, I've just got that visibility very quickly. It allows me to then start to ask some questions of the data. So maybe I want to know those risks which might be due in the next 30 days. Maybe those risks that are assigned to a certain person. Maybe those risks of a certain category, whatever it might be. But it allows me to start to go in and ask those questions very quickly of that information. Last thing I'm going to touch on is benefits as well, because I said I would come back to this. Exactly as I just showed you for risk, we can start to combine all that data into one place. But when I was talking about benefits, I was talking about the ability to build in profiles. So you can start to see, when we think the benefits will be realized versus when we think they're actually going to be assessed. And this is kind of what this little graph over here is doing. We've got a line to say how much money, how much cash or return we are essentially getting for our projects, and when we think that's going to drop. So that's the purple. And then we've assessed that, and we can see where we actually are against that, and we can see actually we are not receiving all the cashful benefits that we thought were all planned against that. Again, we can filter down this data, so maybe you just want to look at your benefits from a particular project or a particular program or a particular grouping of projects based on something else. And again, that's all entirely possible. With Power BI, there's really no limits. The key thing is you've got that underlying data, and then the whole point is you've got one version of the truth that everybody always talks about, but you truly do have this, and you can start to reuse that. And again, another simple example of that is you can build project status reports in here. You can share them with your stakeholders, with your sponsor, your end users, but then you can start to use that same data within your portfolio reports for your PMO teams. So it's not a case of having to go out and build a PowerPoint slide or fill in an Excel document or something like that, and then having to do another report for your PMO to share that data again. It's all about reusing that data and giving that central visibility. Okay, appreciate a little bit tight on time, so I'm probably just going to stop there and hand back to John, and just ask if there's any questions anybody wanted to go through.
Yeah, Thank you, Toby. As Toby says, there, we'll still get you away at 5 o'clock as promised. It will be a bit of a quick wrap up. I know sometimes people don't like asking out loud. So if there are questions you want to put in the chat, but if you do want to come off mute, please, by all means. I can see Matt is typing. But if anyone else has a question, please feel free to either put it in the chat, ask Toby now, or if you would prefer to digest that and ask us at a later date, please just email us, and we'd be delighted to pick that question up. I should also just say in the chat, Toby referenced the webinars we've done around Project for the Web, Power BI, and what have you. My fantastic colleague Megan has put a link to our YouTube channel in the chat. So if you would like to access our YouTube channel, we would welcome it. Please subscribe and like and all those good things. But you can find our YouTube channel, the link to it, in the group chat. I will just let Matt finish typing. In the meantime, I'll just
That's all right.
share.
I was
Go on, Matt.
gonna type, but it's easier if I just ask the question.
Go for it.
Hey Toby,
Yeah.
good presentation. How does the resourcing element work? So in terms of hooking it in with your requests. So if a user requests a project to be put onto the portfolio or into a program, can they say, right, for this project I need X amount of resource, and then how would that hook in then? And do you have any examples of reports and it working, or is that something then that we would kind of go into more detail on and take off and set up another call to go through?
Yeah, so resourcing is probably the hardest part of any BPM solution and process. I've met very few organizations that do it well, to be honest. And everybody seems to do it in slightly different ways and do it for different reasons and need different outputs from it. Typically, that's something that is much higher in the maturity level, so it's not something we have in the base offering. But in effect, how can it be done? It can be done in a number of different ways, and it's all down to what you need to achieve. Down to the biggest complexity, I guess, is there is ability to hold a resource bank, if you like. So people, but could be equipment, could be third parties, could be other things, could be resources in there as well. That would allow, or against a project or request, you have the ability to say, I need to have a project manager or desk or whatever it might be. That can then go to an assigned resource manager who can then look at the availability of project managers or desks or whatever else within a particular time frame, and then they can allocate an individual or a desk back to that request, and that can be sent back to the project manager. So there is that capability in the background, but it is very much down to what each individual, each organization actually needs. Whether you have this kind of very structured resource manager type approach towards life, or whether it's a bit more open, and down to the level of detail as well. Do you need to resource things actually on a day-by-day level, or do you need to, is it just kind of, we need to have a vague understanding of what project managers we've got working for us over the next 2 months type thing? So sorry, I know it's not a very direct answer. The answer is kind of depends, which is my go-to consultancy answer. But there is lots of capability there that's available that can be added on to the project or to requests. The key thing is getting that base project information in place, first of all, the building blocks, and to ensure there's obviously the maturity in the business to enable you to do kind of fuller resource management.
No, thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Matt. Any more for any more? Or we can, as I say, pick this up offline. Toby, please let me thank you for your demonstration. I've seen you do that a few times, but every time is like the first time. It's always very engaging. So thank you for that. I won't bring up my slides to do the last couple of closing. We'll just do this informally, as we've only got about a minute left. But I would point you to the fact that we do actually, we stand by the iCoPlan product. We do offer a free trial of that. So if that were of interest to you, we'd welcome the opportunity to chat to you. And yes, I am doing a bit of a sales pitch now. I promised I wouldn't, but there is an opportunity to just kind of test out iCoPlan, and we'd welcome all feedback, both positive and constructively critical. So if that is of interest to you, please get in touch following this webinar, and also, please follow us on all our social media channels, which I should have put the slides up to show, but I'm sure you can find us. We are iCotech. I would just ask, we're always trying to improve these webinars. So it's usually the case that one of my colleagues would just do a quick a phone call 24, 48 hours after a session, just to get some feedback on whether it was useful, what we could do better, etc., etc. So if you do get a contact from us, again, it's not, putting you in handcuffs, turning up with a baseball bat, making you buy iCoPlan. It is to get some feedback to make these webinars better, because we like to do them, but we appreciate that there's always room to improve. But on that note, if nobody does have any final points, I will draw this to a close. I thank everyone for attending. I thank Toby again for presenting. And of course, if we can be of any assistance at all here at iCotech, we would be delighted to be of use to you. But otherwise, we hope to see you again, and have a fantastic Wednesday evening.